Weekly Scroll podcast brought to you by the Adventure Archive. My name is Ryan, and with me we have the creator of Frontier Scum and much more, Karl Druid. How you doing this morning, Karl?
Doing all right. Evening over here, so I've had my day already, but
there you go.
It's been a chill Saturday so far.
And for those who may potentially not know who you are, maybe outside of Frontier Scum, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the things that people might know you for?
Yeah, I'm Karl Druid from Gothenburg, Sweden. Better known maybe as Make Data Not Lore. I'm not sure. Kind of got started in the creative RPG business with some Mörkborg creations, Graves Left Wanting, the Cursed Skinwalker and such, as well as the digital generators from Mörkborg and Death in Space, Scumburger, etc.
So we actually, when we first started running Mörkborg on our actual play channel, the first thing we ran was Graves Left Wanting. And I think pre-stream, prior to that, we ran the Rot Black Sludge, and Jess, who plays with us, was the Cursed Skinwalker. So we've actually used a bunch of your stuff on our channel, and Graves Left Wanting was, it was great. I don't think I died in that one. I definitely died in Rot Black Sludge, but I don't think I died. Well, we are all technically dead, I guess, you know, when it starts, but yeah. So Frontier Scum. So, I guess my first question with Frontier Scum is what made, a guy in Sweden who has been designing a lot of Mörkborg stuff create a Acid Western role-playing game?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I've always been into the Western aesthetic, not really so much the media around it, just more the moods, the vibes, the gunslinger, that sort of stuff. But I've never really played a Western-inspired role-playing game. The ones I've tried haven't really scratched my particular itch. They're often either very crunchy rules wise, or they're very historical, and neither of those things interest me very much. So that's sort of how Frontier Scum came to be, as a Mörkborg hack first and foremost, and then eventually evolved into its own rule system and vibes.
Gotcha. So it did start as a Mörkborg hack, like that's where.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was like at the beginning it was just Mörkborg with guns, but then as we play tested stuff, sort of I began adding and removing and trying to hit certain vibes, and just eventually it became its own thing. It didn't feel like playing Mörkborg anymore, so it made sense to kind of drop that part of it. But with that said, it's still very much inspired by Mörkborg, the system, especially on the game master side. It's very easy to run Mörkborg adventures with Frontier Scum, but from the player perspective, it's quite a different game.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, going through the rules, yeah, I mean, there are like little bits that are definitely still there, like D20, player facing, defense rolls, DR12, those kind of things. But really, I mean, it feels very, not even really adjacent. Like it's very much feels like its own game. It doesn't feel, it feels a little inspired by, especially in like the kind of like the grittiness and the deadliness of it. But other than that, like it definitely very much feels like its own game.
Yeah. I think the gun rules especially change the game, but also the death checks system. It makes it not as deadly as it first appears, but at the same time it feels very close all the time. I've played several sessions where nobody's died, but everybody's constantly worried about it. And that's sort of the vibe you want to hit, I think, where it feels like any bullet could be the last.
Yeah, the first time I read it, I think my first reaction to the death system was like, A, this is fucking awesome. But B, I was like, man, this is super deadly. People are gonna die all the time. But when you really look at like the drop checks and then the numbers on it, really over 5, you're kind of okay.
Yeah.
But when you first look at it, and I'm sure when you're playing it, it feels a lot more deadly. But I have to say, the death system is probably, if I had to pick a favorite part, my favorite part. I love that there's not really advancement per se in like the game at all. There's like roll a natural 20, get a new skill. You can only have 6, and then you have to switch it out. But like, you know, if you roll, I think it's a 16 and up, you can increase a stat or something. And if you get a natural 20, you're gonna have to increase your health. I love the whole idea of like learning from almost dying, like that feel. And it's not like a ton. It's not like you're suddenly like, you know, do this 3 times and you're a god, like it's D&D 5e or anything. It's like this incremental, like, could die, might not die, do okay not dying, slightly more health, and that's about it. It's fantastic. I like I said, I think it's easily my favorite part.
Yeah, I think the sort of horizontal progression, characters don't really get more powerful, at least not very quickly, but they change, and they change by playing. It's not like oftentimes in games it's you get experience at the end of the session, and then the next session you show up suddenly stronger. But I don't know, I kind of like the idea of you gain experience or you change by the actual things. You can actually link back every skill you've got and every hit point increase and every ability decrease or increase. You can link that to certain events, which makes things a lot more memorable, I think.
Yeah, because even when you roll the 20s, like the option is kind of like you can like take a skill in the thing that you were like trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you like you said, the horizontal progression. Was there like another game that inspired that, or is that something that you were just like, this seems like something I'd like to try, and the mechanics just kind of evolved from it?
Well, I don't. I think there's been elements of that in games. I can't think of anything in particular right now, but I mean, I've seen stuff where characters do gain. There's of course games like the free league system, etc., where you gain the experience, and there you can also like you gain experience for achieving certain things. And that was definitely a bit of the inspiration as well. And of course, the Merc Party, where you can also get worse. I think that's really good because, yeah, you change. You don't necessarily become better. But most of all, it was just a thing I wanted to try, and it worked out.
Yeah, I mean it does. It's fantastic. And like you said, like Merkborg kind of has a little bit of a horizontal progression. It's not like you level up per se. And even something like Death in Space, you know, like you get XP and you can like, I guess, like spend it to improve yourself a little bit, but it's like it's incremental, and it gets exponentially more difficult every time you try to do it. So same thing, you're not like gaining a new power at a certain level. You just evolve, may become slightly more resilient, but not really change at all. You are kind of a complete character when you start, and you grow a little bit, as opposed to starting out as basically like a level 0 farmhand or something and becoming a god. So
yeah.
I guess the next one is like, what is up with, like, what are they feeding you guys in Sweden that over the last like 3 years? Or we got Merkborg, we got Death in Space, we got Frontier Scum. I mean, there's this like just group of like just guys from Sweden that are coming over here and just like blowing up the ttrpg space. You know what I mean? Like I think Merkborg, Death in Space, and now Frontier Scum are some of the most popular games across the indie scene for the past bunch of years. Is it just like where did you guys come from? Like, what is this always been over there, and suddenly there's just like, you know, it's appearing over here for us, or what do you think is kind of like the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a very strong role-playing scene in Sweden since at least the 80s. Like it's been not very not hugely popular, not mainstream by any means, but I mean it's been there. It's been here for a very long time, and one thing I think that's been happening the last couple of years is a lot more Swedish people are creating English games. There's loads of Swedish role-playing games, but they're mostly just in Swedish. You can kind of see it with the Free League stuff. They kind of started out with Swedish stuff, and then they eventually translated, and then eventually they started releasing both languages at the same time, and now they're doing a lot of just English stuff. I think it's a combination of just Swedish people. We learn English quite young. We don't get dubs of stuff really because our population is too small to really make it worth it. So we learn perhaps earlier than many Europeans. Now I think people around in the 30s, 40s are starting to expand. They're feeling confident in their English, and I guess seeing that there's loads of fans enjoying it abroad as well, which is a huge motivator.
Gotcha. And you kind of started putting out stuff with Merkborg, obviously, right? Was that like the first things that you created, or was it just the first things that you put out for other people?
Well, I started with role-playing games quite late. It was when I got into university, and I started out as a player in a campaign that so many other campaigns it sort of died before the first session even. But I wanted to keep it going, so I actually just took up the DMing mantle in 5e then, and I did that a couple of years, and then I moved on to the Free League stuff, and that's sort of when I started creating my own stuff. I did some like not even really public stuff, just stuff I shared internally with friends and stuff like that. And then I think the first published thing on my Drive to RPG is a Lasers and Feelings hack called Ballar och Blod, which means balls and blot in Swedish. It's blot is the Viking tradition of sacrificing stuff, animals mostly. So it's sort of, it was a parody reference to a Swedish Viking comedy show.
Okay.
And nobody's ever played it, but I think that was the first thing that I released.
Gotcha. And then was it the Merkborg cult when that first came out that really started like?
Yeah, definitely. The work that Johan and Pelle put in the beginning, just with the cult and just promoting third-party creators, and the cult especially with actually getting like, it looks good. You get stuff that actually looks professional. That was amazing, and that definitely spurred me on to just keep creating stuff. So yeah, almost all of it is an ode to Merkborg and the Merkborg cult. I'm not sure if I'd be doing as much without them.
And did you know Johan or Pele prior to the Merkborg cult, or was like Graves Left Wanting kind of like the first thing where you guys kind of got together and worked on something?
I think I found Merkborg when they made Johan posted an image just of a Swedish spread of Merkborg. This was before they even had planned the Kickstarter, I think. And I saw it on Reddit, and I joined the community pretty quickly. So there was there from the start, basically. And it was just when I was getting into web development. And I sent them a photo of a sketch for Scum, and then I think that was really hit it off. And then I made some stuff, and they put it in the cult. But before that, I never met them. Still, I've only met them once, but I talked a couple of times.
Gotcha. So it was Scumbirther was the first thing that so it was actually the web development stuff before even like the adventures that kind of put you guys in contact with each other. That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's great. And then I mean, you put a bunch of stuff out in the cults. You've done the Scumbirther, a lot of third party, Merkborg stuff. And I know I'm saying it really wrong, and I do apologize. I wish I could say it more correctly, and I just don't think I have a Swedish tongue for it. But at what point in during that did Frontier Scum become like an idea? Like, has this been brewing for like a couple of years, or is it pretty much like you got an idea, you pushed it through, and then it came out?
Yeah, like the idea, I think it hit me during vacation times, about exactly 1 year ago, August last year. And I just made some spreads, I played around with it. Then I said, hey, this can actually work. So I basically shut myself off from any other creative stuff. And then since August last year, I've basically just been grinding Frontier Scum. But so it was, I guess in hindsight, a pretty quick project, but it felt like ages sitting there reworking spreads over and over again, and all the play testing and the changing. I made the mistake of going with layout first, which meant I wrote stuff straight into the layout, and then I had to change a rule, and then suddenly the layout didn't work anymore, and I had to do it again. So, but the whole process was very much iterative. Like I had the first like 28 pages. It was supposed to be a scene, and then it just kept growing, as things often do. And I got in contact with Brian, Yaksha, and Chalk Down. I got my friend Skull Fungus to do some art as well, which was really cool, and Walton Wood doing the editing. And in some ways, it became more of a project management thing. And just putting together all the stuff that they helped me to create. Yeah, it definitely wouldn't be the same without them.
Yeah, I mean, first to go from an idea to this in less than a year, because this book's been out for a little while, is that just seems crazy to me. That seems like such a short period of time to be working on any project, to go from like you said, initial layout to literally having it printed by Games Omnivorous, and like being printed like all over the world at this point, going into a second printing. What you just said is like putting people together. In the beginning, like in the credits, it says Brian Yaksha did the setting words. Does that mean like in the first, chunk prior to the map where it talks about like all the location spots, is that mostly Brian's writing?
Yeah, that's Brian's writing. We worked together. I think I had an outline of all the locations, but since it was such a fast-paced project, I felt I just didn't have the either the writing shops or the time to really put into making it really, really good. And Brian's stuff is phenomenal, so I contacted him, and we worked together. And he, yeah, like the result, I still read those, and I love every word. I think it's great.
Yeah, he's they're a great writer, and just the way that they I don't even know how to describe the vibe that they can put into like a paragraph, and even just a couple of words. Like it can really pull you in like really quickly to whatever the setting or the style is. And they definitely have like a very dark way of writing, and that I think with Frontier Scum especially, it really pulls you into, because it's not just like a like, hey, this is like shoot 'em up Western or whatever. Like it's a dark game. Like it's very, and the Westerns, it's not like a spaghetti Western. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like it's a dark lost frontier. It's really supposed to feel that way. And even the intro adventure name, the Oregon Train,
Organ Rail, yeah.
the Oregon Rail, which I read as the Oregon Trail a million times before I read Oregon Rail, which obviously I assume that was the inspiration for that. And I did. My brain just read Oregon Trail over and over and over again before I was like, wait, no, it's Oregon Rail. This is amazing. That's the name of the intro adventure. So you can clearly see, especially even like some of the Merkborg inspiration still coming into that. And then you said you got some of your friends to do that, but layout outside of the adventure is all you, right?
Yeah, it's it's me and a whole bunch of public domain artwork.
And then, so the inspiration behind, I'll just hold up the book, and for those in podcast land, I'm sorry you can't see this, but we talked about this before it started. There are like no margins in this book, and it is packed. And I feel like every small space it could have been there is filled with just an awesome like old Western ad for something, like some snake oil or something like that. What was the inspiration for the layout? Was it like old paper, like newspapers or things from the time and things like that? And if so, like where did you kind of pull the inspiration or like references or anything from to do that?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to hit, like, you can kind of tell that the first setting bit is definitely like it's inspired by just old timey newspapers. I looked at a lot of newspaper layouts online, and then as the book goes on, it kind of becomes more of a catalog style where the rules start popping up. And that was definitely like I had this recreation. It's still somewhere around here. A 700-page Sears catalog recreation from 1897, which just has so many ads for everything from like bags of flour to revolvers to houses. And it was just I flipped through that so much just working on the layout. So that was a huge inspiration.
I mean,
and then of course,
no, I'm sorry, what's it?
yeah, and of course Red Dead Redemption 2. Yeah. But that goes without saying, I think.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that, I don't think there is a game that you could play Red Dead Redemption. If you wanted to run Red Dead Redemption as a tabletop role play game, I don't think there's anything better than Frontier Scum that could possibly like bring in everything that Red Dead Redemption has. You know what I mean? I can't imagine anything that could do it as well. And then even as far as the cover, which is absolutely stunning, I think because Walton wrote an article about this on their blog, right? And I think he said that this wasn't his choice of cover to start. Is that a story?
No, I believe the words were something like, "I'm telling you as a friend, don't use this cover, whatever you do." And then I did it anyways. But he's come around to it. Yeah, that's. I had a bunch of different ideas for the cover, and then I don't know, this one just felt right. It's very inspired by old catalogs.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I love the cover. I think it's absolutely stunning. Is there a chance ever to have like alternate cover, just like shot somewhere that we could see what Walton might have like wanted instead, or is that just all going to stay tucked away between you guys?
Yeah, I don't think I have them at hand, but maybe in the future sometime I'll dig them out.
Gotcha. I mean, I'm glad he was wrong, is all I'm saying, because this is stunning. So, and then also speaking of the cover in the physical book, this is it's only I've seen it a couple of times, like Wet Grandpa has a similar binding on the edge, this like kind of lay flat open non-binding. What was behind the decision to do this, and was there any issue printing deciding to do this as opposed to a regular one? Did it make a huge difference trying to go through that process?
Well, it was a very close collaboration with the publisher Games Omnivorous and Andre over there, and we worked, just iterated a bunch of different designs. We had, like, for a while this fall leather kind of Bible, old timey Bible vibe going, but eventually we kind of settled on this, and it was a pretty huge gamble, really, because we couldn't get the print proof from the printer, like the actual finished binding. So we kind of had to just wing it and hope. So it was a scary wait for the 500 copies to arrive at Games Omnivorous. But it turned out just like we wanted. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's stunning. Like, there's not another book, I think, on anyone's shelf that's going to look like this. And the cover itself, is this just what would normally be inside like a normally bound book? Like, this is the It's just not covered with fabric
Yeah,
or whatever they normally
exactly,
put on it.
exactly. So they usually put like the cover on top of that. But other like physically, it's just a naked book.
And when so you couldn't get the proof for this. When you asked the printer to do this, were they like, excuse me? Or were they like, no, yeah, we could totally just not cover it and do this kind of binding? Or
Yeah, they had the alternative. I think it's mostly used for like photo albums and stuff.
okay.
But they had the technology. I think that's where the idea came from, that they had that somewhere on their website or something. Yeah, if you look online, I think most all of the examples are photo albums. I think the only limitation we had, which was kind of annoying at the start, was that we had to use the cardboard color. Since it's just the inside of a hardcover book, we couldn't really do anything about that. But as we iterated over the covers, this one came out, and we made it work, I think.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like I said before the stream started, I bought two so that I could tuck one away and never ever touch it just in case something happens to this one. And I guess it makes sense with this style binding for photo albums, which people like to open up completely. And with this style, like you can easily, like the whole thing just is very lay flat, which is fantastic to have at the table. I mean, I know a lot of people, they sometimes do like the ring binding so that it'll lay flat, but this just looks so much more elegant than that, and sits on the shelf a little bit easier than the ring binding on the edge. But I mean, beginning to end, this is absolutely stunning. And now, Games Omnivorous. At what point did you kind of meet with them or talk with them, or what was the initial? Did they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? How did you guys pair up, basically?
Yeah, I think I was over at the Liber Ludorum server with the development. Like I did a bunch of development updates, and the people there were super helpful to the process, and they kind of kept, because I was planning to just release it on itch as a black and white PDF for home printing, but they kind of kept pushing to do something even more with it, and eventually I reached out to Games Omnivorous. I think it was in the winter sometime, like late last year, and I sent them the 28-page scene, which was close to completion at that point, and then they were into it, and suddenly it turned into a 64-page book.
So when you had the original zine, what made it into, or what expanded after that initial thing that you had? Is a lot of the setting text, or was it like the adventure? Like what was the original zine like compared to what it is now?
Yeah, it was I think even tighter. There was like it's quite tight at the moment, but there was even more content on every page. But then as we increased the page count, I redid some layout and sort of spread stuff out, added the ads in the setting. I think that was 4 pages originally. I think it's 6 now. And then of course all the tables, the carousing, and all the end tables, like at the end there, those were also late additions. But other than that, I think almost everything was already there in the scene.
Yeah, because I mean, it's a 64-page book, but if you look at just mostly the rules, basically, it's really only about 20 pages of rules, and even some of that is like ads and things like that. I mean, I love when books do what you did, which is to put like a 2-page spread in the back of just like the rules. I know Merkborg does the same thing, Death in Space, like all of those games do the same thing. Like they all do easily fit, like, I mean, a little bit tight, but like easily on 2 pages. It really is only about 20 pages of rules. So from the initial zine, were there any big rules changes that happened, or was it mostly adding the setting, adding the adventures, adding the roll tables, kind of just expanding on like the resources that you can do a little bit more?
Oh yeah, I mean we did play tests. I think in the end, yeah, we like almost every other week with the guys from Liberliderum. We did so many playtests, and every time I basically changed stuff. And the scene version definitely isn't the same as the final version. There was a bunch of changes. I remember I did especially like the thing I think I worked on the absolute most was the damage rules for melee weapons, which sounds weird because it's such a tiny bit of it, but since I wanted melee weapons to feel fun to use and also be a viable option, but also not outshine the guns, because the whole thing is that the guns dominate. You don't want to face a gun. So that was really tricky, and it went through so many iterations.
Yeah, because unless I'm completely mistaken, like if you shoot a gun, it hits, right?
Yeah, unless it's a tough shot, which they rarely are. It might be like in a close combat struggle or from a far distance, depending on the gun you use. But almost every time a gun is fired, it hits.
Yeah, I mean, in a game where you don't have a lot of HP, I mean, guns are deadly. I mean, it's if you get shot, especially back then, like you're probably gonna die. Like it feels really like it's weird to say in a tabletop game, but it feels realistic. You know what I mean? You should fear this thing that they have. You know what I mean? And I guess it does make sense that trying to make melee viable in any way, shape, or form when you just have something that can kill you in one shot and always hits. I guess that would be a lot more difficult than I guess originally I thought it would be. So, how long did it take you to actually get to a point where you really liked it? And I assume you're good, you're happy with it now. Like you were just like, okay, this is it, this one works, or
Yeah, I don't. I worked up until the final like editing run, like the final round of editing we did. It just kept changing every day, basically for a couple of weeks. Uh, Damage up and down, and bonuses, and exploding, and all sorts of different changes to just make it feel. Because at the same time, I didn't want to have a bunch of uh, rules for melee, because then that would take away from the vibes. So it had to be short, but also interesting. And I think like that was kind of my philosophy with all this stuff. I wanted it to feel a certain way rather than be necessarily simulationist uh, or anything. Just feel a certain way. And I think in one of the playtests where we did Ancient Skin, the Merkbar adventure, that was one of the first time we tried the almost final melee weapon rules. And one of the players, his character, he was wrestling on the ground with a manhunter trying to catch them and probably eat them, I think. And the fight sort of ended like they were thrown off their horses, and then the final enemy was just wrestling on the ground with this guy, and he rolled. He hit with his knife. The player character hit with his knife, and he rolled a 4, and then he rolled another 4, and then he rolled another 4, and we could just see in front of us how this character was just sat on top of this guy, had been wrestling, and just kept on stabbing and stabbing and stabbing. Meanwhile, his friends were all dragged into the woods. But there was a really cool finish to
yeah.
that adventure.
It's funny because I'm right there with you. But from the outside, sometimes, playing Merkborg, something like this, you're like, man, like if people like heard us playing this game and didn't really have any context for this, we sound terrible. We all sound like psychopaths. But yeah, to just be like, man, when this guy was just stabbing this guy and stabbing this guy, stabbing this guy, I knew that I had it right. That's when melee felt good. Like that's awesome.
Yeah.
And what, like you were talking about vibes in the game, which I mean, fuck, like this is one of the vibiest games I've ever read. One of the things I like about the way that you did the rules is it feels like whatever we want to call it now, like OSR, NSR, whatever this thing is, but where it's like there are rules where there need to be rules, and when there don't, it's like fucking make it up. Like I trust you. Just do what you want to do. Like conditions in this is fantastic. It's like there's one or two. There's and then it's like if none of these match, make something up. Just go for it. When you were designing this game, where's the line kind of where you're like, this feels like it needs a rule, but this feels like it doesn't? Like where, like how do you get comfortable being like, I feel like this is okay to just, you know, give to GM fiat, but like this one needs one? Were there times where you wrestled with like choosing to write a rule or not write a rule?
Yeah, I think the conditions particularly show that where I came to the conclusion that I don't need to specify every possible way a person could be affected by something. That was definitely one of the I think the conditions. Like at one point there were a bunch of conditions, and I also tried going the other way and just having one condition. But at the end, I felt like the best way to go about it is just trust in the GM. And I cut a lot of stuff, and I changed a lot of stuff. And I think as a programmer, I do like to kill my darlings, so to say. So I was very close to cutting even more stuff, just keeping only the essentials. But after playtesting and stuff, I kept some things that I might not have kept, but the players really wanted to stay. So that definitely showed which things actually mattered. I think if between playtests, I might have come and said, "Oh, I cut this thing," and if they didn't react or if they approved, I knew it was the right thing to do.
Is there any rule specifically where you're like, man, I want this to go, but they were like, no, man, you have to keep this one in. Like, you just absolutely have to. Is there anything specifically that stands out?
Yeah, I think one of the latest things was when I was debating whether to keep the hat rule or not, which is, I mean, it sounds strange, but at that time, I felt like that wasn't really sharing the same vibes of being super deadly and grimy and stuff. And then I think this time Walt came with a good suggestion instead of a terrible one, and he convinced me to keep it. He was definitely right about that one.
Yeah,
I
it's. I
don't
mean,
regret it one bit keeping it.
no, that's a great one. When like we were talking about early stream, Jason runs all of our Merkborg, Deaths in Space, like basically all of our Free League stuff and all of our, you know, that whole realm of games. He runs all of those on our Thursday games. And when he first read Frontier Scum, one of the first things he said to me was, "Man, I love the hat roll. Like this is awesome." You know, it's one of the very first things, and it's true. Like as far as vibes go, I guess it's a competing vibe. It's like it's a little bit less deadly, but it's a cowboy hat. Like how much more vibe can you get than a cowboy hat? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, good call by Walt on that one. Absolutely. And it became like a whole page spread in the rules, right? Like there's literally
yeah.
with like a giant target on the chest and everything. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I love that because so much there's a couple pages that are like that a little bit, but in the layout, so much of it is so tight. Like you said, it's very dense, like that catalog. But then that one, it just feels very open, and it gives it this sense of importance because there's so much white on the page. It really, and a giant target in the middle of the page, that it makes it feel really fantastic. Was that on purpose to be like, this is a super important rule, so let's make this different than all the rest of it?
Yeah, like the hat rule has barely any text. So originally in the layout, it was just this tiny little box at the end of a page, and I think that's also sort of why I was looking to scrap it, because it was kind of trailing at the end. But then when I decided to keep it, I decided to just, okay, let's give it all the attention. I don't want anyone to miss it if it's gonna be there. And I'm really happy with how that turned out. I think that was one of the favorite images that I was just waiting to put somewhere as well. The guy with the bullseye on his holding the
And like
bullseye.
the bullet through his forehead.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite pages. And then really early on, the wanted page, the guy's face on that is just, it's haunting. Like, it's fantastic. And then right underneath wanted, like, it took me, I think I read it was probably in my second or third read, because I was just kind of like, oh man, and then I read the things. But the D4s right underneath the wanted, where it's like 1 or 2 is dead or alive, 3 is dead, 4 is alive, like that page and that whole part is just absolutely fantastic. And the way that the skills are done, with the backgrounds and stuff, it's that same kind of like I trust you to make it up kind of thing. It's like, here's some, that page is that public domain art, or is that one of
Yeah, that's actually one that Michal, or Neonon, or Eileen as he goes by, he does some awesome layout stuff with using almost exclusively public domain images. That's actually one that he put together for me, a bit of a collage sort of thing. And that was actually supposed to be the cover originally, back when it was a scene. It didn't fit as well as with a book, but originally that was supposed to be the cover, and then I kind of reworked it. I added the background with the tombstone, and I made it into the wanted page. But that's public domain art, but I think it's 2 or 3 different public domain arts put together skillfully.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite pieces of art in the entire book as well. And then the way that you did backgrounds and skills and stuff like that, what was the inspiration for that? Because for those that haven't read the book, for example, like when you say like carcass trapper, roll a d6, a skill you learned when you found a ripe deer in a tree, is like, that's awesome. The first time I read through that, I was like, this is so fucking cool. Like, this isn't just like you get stealth, you get this, you get that. Like, it's just almost more like this experience that you had, and like, what did you get from that you can use in the future? What was the inspiration behind doing that? Because there are pages of these too, and all the bonus skills that come from that. Did those kind of just come out, or did it take a while to do D66 tables of things like that?
Yeah, that was the D66 tables especially was one of those things that took quite some time. I just filled in a couple here and there. I kept notes on my phone, so whenever I thought of something, I put it in the list, just over quite a long period of time. But that was originally there was more of a feat system similar to unheroic feats, the Mörkbar third party, Mörkbar Cult even publication, where each character had like a feat, which was a special ability. But as we play tested, it became apparent partly that characters felt more powerful because if it's a feat, it has to be sort of special. If it's a mundane feat, it's not fun. But at the same time, the feats were kind of defining the characters. Like, oh, I can hold my breath underwater for an hour. Oh, that's and that became their character. And it also very clearly affected how they approached the game. Like they tried to use their feats at every opportunity, and it felt like the feats were controlling too much of the gameplay as well as the role play. So I kind of sat down and I began first I had a list of skills. So for instance, the Dr. Sans diploma had just skills like invoke, what was it? Oh, I can't remember now, but it was like different specific skills like surgery and stuff like that. That didn't feel quite right either, because they were so specific and didn't really feel like they related to you need a lot of skills if you're gonna make something that feels varied. So then, just like with conditions, I decided that yeah, let's leave that to the creativity of the people reading and playing the game. Yeah, I think the first time we did a playtest with those rules, it was a great success. Like even now, when I'm running a campaign in Frontier Scum, and it's always fun because you don't see it coming. Like when someone gets a new skill, and they always remember where they got the skill, and even the skills from character creation feel like their own skills. They often remember, like when they did character creation, why they learned that skill, which helps with the role play, but also doesn't completely define the character. So I think that's sort of the answer in a long-winded way.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's it. Just feels so good. Like when you're thinking about making a character, it's more just like it feels more like a memory. You know what I mean? Like than anything, you know. And I love the way that, like, you know, like I said, for example, one is Carcass Trapper, and it's a D6, a skill you learned when. But then on Discharged Deputy, it's a skill earned by, and then on Suffering Clerk, it's a skill from that time you. So it's like it's not. There's like a structure to it, but everyone feels different every time you do it. It's not the same language, but it's similar. Like it all feels a little bit different, and it really does. It makes you feel. And then like tools of the trade as well for some of those things, or like the discharged deputy, law folks knickknacks, and the suffering clerk is office supplies and such. Like it all has the same structure, but like is very very different every single time. And like you said, like it feels like you're like it's not feats, it's not these other things that you have, and it, like I said, it feels like having memories, as if like you're remembering this character, or like, you know, when you have built the character, it feels, I don't know, it feels more real. I don't know how to say it than that, you know what I mean? Like I don't feel like I have a list of things that I can use in the future. I feel like I have a list of like memories that I can draw on to look to things, as well. And I don't know, it's cool is all I'm trying to say. Like it's absolutely fantastic. Gosh, I'm trying to even, there's so much. I know it's only 20 pages, but they're dense pages. Like you really packed a lot into these, even though a lot of it is like very uh not, how do I say it, not quickly written. Like it's very concise. Do you think, like with your programming background, like I know you talked about like Kill Your Darlings, and I know you talked and you started with a little bit of programming and stuff. How do you think programming, or do you think programming affects the way that you write rules specifically, or the way that you have the rules interact with each other?
Yeah, like scalability, for instance, is something that I brought with me. I think like being able to expand on stuff, like for instance, the skills and the conditions and stuff. It could really go. You could expand on that and create how many backgrounds you wanted, and how many conditions you need. And I think that's one part that really came with the programming background, as well as like the way that different systems interact with each other. I'm still I still find new stuff, like if I'm trying to think of a ruling or whatever, and then I realize that, oh, this like the drunk system, the drunk condition, it sort of plays nicely into this thing, and etc etc. So I think with it being scalable, it allows, even if I wrote the game, I still get surprised by new ways of doing stuff. Like there was in last week's session a character that has the drunk condition when he swaps his grits, which is his grit is really high, like a +4, and he swaps that with his luck, which is a -1 when he's drunk. And they were lost in the fog of Putrescence Regnant, and they had tried to find their tracks back to the boat, but they couldn't. So then he decided to chug a bottle of wine and then trust in his luck, and stumble into this fog, and just said, "Follow me, guys." and that was just I hadn't seen that one coming, but it was very memorable and very surprising. And I think just the memory bit, like not just in the game but also gameplay wise, I think as the development of Frontier Scum went on, that became more and more important, like creating moments where you could remember stuff happening, but also where you could imagine how stuff might have ended differently. And I think I really succeeded in that way, that oftentimes when playing, you can kind of tell that, oh, that particular dice, that result, that changed things completely, and you remember that. And I feel like every time we play, we create memories, and that's sort of, I think, what I enjoy most about role-playing games, is having a bunch of fun memories of crazy situations that happen and sharing that with the people I play with.
Yeah. I mean, and that really, I think, drives a lot of these like rulings over rules games. I think that's probably a better way to describe than like OSR, NSR, whatever people want to call it. I think rulings over rules really just feels a lot better because one of the things that you said is really important about the game is the vibe of the game, and to kill the vibe of an entire scene or something because some rule doesn't quite let the coolest thing happen or whatever just never feels good. I ran into that too much in 5e, where it's like, you come across a sleeping guy and you have a dagger and you stab the guy in the neck. Obviously you kill him. No, like a dagger only does 4 damage. This guy has 400 damage. You can't kill. It's like, come on, And that really drove me towards rulings over rules. And I feel like this game, it shows that so much, where the vibe is so important to it, and the rules are written in such a way that there's this kind of innate permission to just, the rule of cool is written all over this book in all of these places. And it just feels really, really good. Like, even when you're reading it all the way through, and the first time I read it, and the second time I read it, and the third time I read it, like, every time I flip the page, I'm like, this is so fucking cool. Like, this is so fucking cool. Like, I mean, I don't need, good job. I guess I don't even know what to say besides that. I mean, it's such a good fucking game. Like, realistically, like, easily, unquestionably one of my favorite games that I've ever read, and easily one of the best games that's come out this year. Before I say that, I want to ask one more question about something. The stats in the beginning was a question that I had. The D4 minus D4 to start with, pretty low stats. I know that Death in Space does the same kind of thing, and Merkborg has like a similar kind of thing. Was that all kind of like the inspiration for all of that, was just those games in general, or?
Yeah, like I had the 3d6 thing that Merkborg does, but then I read Death in Space and I was like, I'm stealing that. That's great. That's perfect. I tried really to, like, Merkborg is fantastic. A lot of the stuff in Frontier Scum is not just the mechanics, but the philosophy behind it, and rulings over rules. And I think Merkborg was the first game that showed me that it doesn't need to tell you everything. It just sort of trusts you to understand what it's going for. And I think that's really, really, really great. One thing I tried to do with Frontier Scum was, how can I, because I've been in the Merkborg community since the beginning, so I knew I visit their Discord daily. I know exactly which questions pop up in the rules questions section. And the 3d6 for ability scores was one of those things that it keeps popping up. So when I saw that in Death in Space, and that's one way to not have that question come up. End of the day, I stole it. No regrets.
It's really, really, I mean, the first time I read it in Death in Space, I was like, this is so good. Like, this is so, why does no one do this? Like, this is fantastic. And for a game like this, I mean, it fits perfectly. It keeps, I mean, your stats could literally be negative, like really easily. Like, I know when we ran Death in Space, I think we all averaged maybe one positive stat and a couple of zeros and like one really shitty stat. Um, and it feels good. Like, it's not a hero game. Like, I played enough hero games. Like, I'm not trying to eventually fight gods. Like, I want to risk death turning a corner. Like, I want to literally, if I'm not thinking and I run around shotgun to my face, I'm gone. Like, that's what I want. I want the risk because I got tired of knowing that it was all balanced for me. You know what I mean? And unless I somehow have a string of like the worst rolls I'm ever gonna roll, I'm not gonna die. And even if I do, the GM might fudge it just to keep the story going. Like, I just couldn't do that anymore. And D4 minus D4 sounds so simple, but there's so much written into that and like so much outcome from that where, I try to encourage a lot of people in 5e to be like, play up your flaws. Like, look at your worst stat and really make that cool. And with this, every one of your stats could be your worst stat, and it feels really fantastic. So, I mean, I couldn't think of, as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh man, like, this is great already. Death in Space had it. This has it. I know exactly what this is going for. It's just really good. I guess what's next for Frontier Scum? I know that there's been jams and all sorts of things, but as far as what you're doing or plans for the game, I know we were talking before. There's a second edition imprinting because this sold out almost immediately and then popped up for like 2 seconds on Exalted and sold out immediately again. So besides a second printing happening, what's the future of Frontier Scum look like?
I think it's still very much up in the air. I'm hoping to. I have a lot of stuff to do outside of Frontier Scum at the moment, but once that clears up, I have a lot of stuff I want to do. Lots of adventures and extra little supplements. Like I said, it's quite modular and scalable, so you can add a lot of stuff quite easily. Little root classes and such. Yeah, there's one bigger thing planned, but I can't really talk about that yet.
There was a question in chat. Will there be a special edition?
Not that I know of right now. There might be. It would be cool. We did float around the idea of having an A6 version because if you do a fall leather cover, the book sort of looks like a restaurant menu because the cover is actually bigger, thicker than all the pages put together. But if you redid it as an A6, you could have twice the amount of pages. You could make like a little pocket fall leather edition, which would be really cool. But that's not on the horizon, I don't think. Gotcha.
Maybe. Do you ever imagine a second edition going forward from here? Is there anything that, even now that it's out and you read it again where you're like, man, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that? Or are you just kind of basking in your success and making one of the best games, that a lot of people have ever read for right now and just kind of working on just like the supplements and stuff like that?
No, I mean, I keep thinking of stuff I could have done differently. But overall, I think like I'm really happy with it, how it turned out. Like for a while, I was worried since I was pretty much grinding it, spending very many hours on it, I was worried I'd hate it by the time it came out. But actually, I'm excited to run it and I'm excited to play it and I'm excited to make more stuff for it. So I'm very happy with that. But if there was one thing I'd change, I'd probably reduce the number of back inventory slots to 2 and increase the belt slots to 4. That's the one thing that I'd change. But I'm not sure if that's worth a second edition.
Gotcha. Well, anyone listening, now you know the real rules is written. We're switching up these inventory slots.
Yeah. You could just use a marker and change it. I don't
Just
mind.
write it in. You were talking about
Yeah,
coloring in the black and white pictures, which God,
yeah.
I can't imagine ever putting anything inside this book. But for those listening, just write it. Just go ahead and take your beautiful book and just scribble in it and just fix that. I had a question. When you run Western, what does role playing look like at your table? I guess like do you use a Southern accent and wear a cowboy hat when you're playing the game, or?
Well, I don't when I run it, but well, I use the cowboy, my best cowboy impression, obviously. But uh, my main table of players, they've kind of taken to using a deck of cards to track aces, and they all wear hats to keep track of if they have their hat on or not. So yeah, we actually play in English. We're all Swedish, but we kind of for a long time, even before we started with Frontier Scum, we've been playing in English just because it feels kind of corny in Swedish. I'm sure other groups do the same. But yeah, I'm not sure if it looks like a normal gaming table. I'm not sure what that looks like.
Oh,
It
there is such a
gets
thing.
sort of rowdy. I think we do. I would describe my table as a beer and pretzel sort of thing. People come and go, and we blast music, and sometimes get completely stuck in ridiculous nonsense. But
I mean, that sounds like a
yeah,
normal gaming table to me. I mean,
yeah,
that sounds like, when I try to describe tabletop role playing games, I mean, you have to be like, well, it's like Dungeons and Dragons, but let me tell you all the reasons it's not. But a lot of times it's like it's just a fucking poker game with your buddies, but you kill dragons and shoot cowboys and stuff. Like that's
yeah.
literally the only difference. We're all fuckheads, just like drinking beer, eating pretzels, like ripping on each other. We just happen to be like rolling dice instead of like flipping cards, or even flipping cards. It's fine. Like it's the same thing. It's just getting together with your buddies, and just having a fun time. Um, but I guess why do you think it sounds corny to play Frontier Scum in Swedish? Is it just because westerns are so often like in English with the accent and stuff like that, or?
Partly that, but I think that's true with any Swedish role-playing game that isn't uh, like even Swedish games written in Swedish are oftentimes corny because we don't like a goblin. That's a very common English word, but then when you translate it to Swedish, like our word for goblin is the same as the word for troll and ogre, which makes it kind of annoying. You have to come up with new terms that nobody uses, and it sounds kind of cheesy. And I think the one I'm playing in a Viking game where we're playing the game Viking from 1994, and our GM is a history buff who knows everything about the Viking times. So we speak Swedish. We're a couple of Vikings from pretty much the Gothenburg area, going on all sorts of adventures, and it's more like playing a History Channel documentary than a beer and pretzels game. We're just sitting and talking about Viking times, which is completely different, but that works in Swedish because it's Vikings, and yeah, I think like if it's some sort of thing based in that where we have the words in Swedish and they don't sound silly, it's perfectly fine. But I think a lot of people feel the same way. I know that many people also just speak Swinglish when they play, so they use English terms for all the fantasy stuff, but they speak Swedish, which also sounds a bit silly. So we decided to move over to English completely.
Gotcha. Hey, listen, considering that like 90% of the people born in America speak one language, and like pretty much I assume everyone in Sweden speaks at least two. You guys can do whatever you want as far as that. You're definitely farther ahead than we are. Um, one of the things I did want to say that I always bring up when we do reviews, and I will sing the praises of this later, but I wanted to thank you personally now, is the bookmarks are fantastic. The hyperlinks are fantastic. Inline hyperlinks are fantastic. This is one, as soon as I pulled up the PDF and rolled to the first thing and it turned into a hand and I could click the hyperlink, I can't tell you how excited I was that this is super hyperlinked and completely bookmarked. That's one thing that I don't know, for no reason whatsoever, has become like my like sticking point with some PDFs where I'm like, oh man, it's not hyperlinked. But thank you very much for all of the hyperlinks and the bookmarks and everything. It is very beautifully done. Very good job on that. And I will be, as I said, singing the praises of that again later this evening when we do the review. So
Thank you. That's a shout out to Walt for making sure each and every one works. He clicked on every one of them. And shout out to Chalkdown for the best hyperlinks I think I've ever seen, which is if you click on the little train car icons below and the mini map below the train car sheets, one actually works as a hyperlink, which is really cool. And I love it. I click on them sometimes in the PDF just for fun. So yeah.
Nice. So yeah, where we talked about a second printing of this already. Do you know when a second printing is going to come out, or is that like a Games Omnivorous decision? And
it's on the way. I think it's the order's in at the printer, but there's paper shortage and all sorts of stuff going on. But yeah. I think the estimate is like late next month, October, somewhere around there. And no firm dates yet, but as soon as possible is basically the answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, when they sold out, I mean, how long did it take to sell out? Was it even like a week? Did it even last a week on the website?
Yeah, I think it was like 1 week and 6 days or something like that. So just under 2 weeks. We were planning to sell out in 3 months. So it was pretty amazing. And then the Exalted Funeral, when that hit, and there was 140 copies and they flew off the shelves. It was just 3 days.
I was going to say, I was surprised they lasted a day on there. I got my first one directly from the Games Omnivorous website, and I think I got my second copy from Floating Chair Club. I think that's who I got it from. But I almost bought a third one just because I was like, at some point I'm going to want to give somebody this. And I'm going to be so excited by it. I'm going to be like, here, just take one. So we'll see with second printing if that happens. But I know a lot of the stuff that you have for Frontier Scum is on your itch page, but Frontier Scum itself, like the digital version, is not on your itch page. Where do people actually find Frontier Scum, the digital version, since it's not in print right now?
That's on Games Omnivorous ttrpg page. If you go to frontierscum.com, you'll have the link there, as well as links to our Discord and the subreddit, which hasn't kicked off yet. Maybe one day it will. And of course my Twitter as well, if you want to follow. I don't tweet very often, but when I do, it's quality. So.
And your Twitter is Make Data Not Lore?
Yeah. Make Data Not Lore.
And then your itch page as well that's just that's Make Data Not Lore as well, right? Make Data Not Lore.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, just search Karl Druid, itch on Google and it'll take you right to that. Find all of a lot of the Merkborg stuff. You can find Scumburger on there, the Scumatorium, a whole lot of stuff. And then, as I said, a lot of links to other Frontier Scum things. And you put out Cattle Dash. The affinity brushes are fantastic. The maps are fantastic. Like all of those things. And even the art pack for Oregon Rail that you talked about. Which is fantastic. So if you want to actually run the game, there are tons of resources on the Make Data Not Lore itch page that I have already sent to our DM so he can start prepping, because as we were talking about before, we will be running Frontier Scum. I'm pretty sure I got the 100% confirmation, and I think we're either going to do Oregon Rail or we're going to do Walton's Adventure. So we'll see. I won't know until he decides to tell us, because I haven't read them, just in case I actually get to play. But yeah, make sure you check out, if you did not get a copy, that really sucks for you, because I got 2. So wait for the second printing, but check out frontierscum.com. It'll take you to all the links for the rest of that stuff. And as he said before, Make Data Not Lore on Twitter and itch for those things. Karl, seriously, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I can't wait to get to the review tonight. It is, at our time, it's about 11:15 So it'll be 6 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be hopping on, myself and Hunter, and actually doing a read through and review of the game this evening. I assume you'll probably be asleep at that time. So
yeah, it's like 3 a.m. my time.
Yeah.
I won't be here. But yeah, also shout out to Walton Woods, Bark Witch of Carcass Country, and Shark Downs. Very cool Blood Moon Vernissage, which are the two of the several awesome Frontier Scum adventures that I have absolutely nothing to do with. So check those out as well. And I think there's a poll going on Twitter right now between Cyborg and Frontier Scum.
I don't think it's really.
And, you should vote.
I think
everybody should vote for Frontier Scum.
I think it got blown out of the water pretty quickly. Frontier Scum, I think it had tripled Cyborg real quick. And I messaged Jason and was like, "Hey, I think Frontier Scum is gonna win this," and he was like, "I think so too." And he just started prepping Frontier Scum at that point. So
there's still some couple of days left. So
hey, I think you won. I think regardless, I think no matter how it plays out, we're gonna end up running both. So you can be rest assured that Frontier Scum will be coming to actual play on the Adventure Archive. And speaking of the Adventure Archive, that is what we are under on YouTube. We are the Adventure Archive. This is a weekly scroll podcast. You can find us on Twitter at weekly_scroll and on Instagram at the.weekly.scroll. Again, Karl, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know you are on the other side of the world, and that this is not the most ideal time, but I genuinely do really appreciate you coming on, and I'm super excited to go over the game. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you. And right. Yeah, thanks for having me. And just a reminder that no one, under any circumstances, should lick the binding. I'm not sure if it's food safe, so please don't. I don't want to be sued.
So if you're listening, now you know what to do. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being in chat. Really appreciate it. And you guys all have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Have it good. Bye-bye.